Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Let's hop in. Today is Wednesday, January 18th. My sleep schedule is still a little wonky, so I'm starting later in the evenings. I have an appointment I need to take tomorrow, so that'll be interesting. Let's see. A new theme chronicle event is underway, so I guess that's what we're going to be spending the rest of this month focusing on, instead of potentially putting in the time to do the ranked play and get up to platinum. Yeah, it's just unlikely, it seems, that you would have the free time to both play platinum for the rest of this month, or play ranked to get to platinum, and have the time to do this extra theme event, which this is just very consistently exactly what happens every single time, every single month with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. And we are definitely in a weird position, or I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in particular is in a weird position where they have not set themselves up well for a somewhat unexpected event, in the fact that the Dungeons and Dragons OGL controversy is only re-highlighting the problems and complaints with Magic the Gathering too, since Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast and Wizards of the Coast owns both of those. So one would expect that that there is a high chance that a bunch of people would jump over from like playing Magic the Gathering to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And there would be a percentage of that would be digitally inclined. I guess the first question to ask here, as far as the theme deck, can I just do Zodiac Tri-Brigade? Let's see. No, not seemingly. We couldn't use, first of all, Tri-Brigade, Sharangan, and we couldn't use any of the Zodiac characters, which I don't understand why this Zodiac character is allowed, but this Zodiac character is not allowed. We could do Zeus still with this deck, but yeah, that doesn't seem like that's doable. This one is not doable because none of the Floandries decks cards are allowed, so neither one of our pre-built decks, which that's basically the only two I would possibly select, are going to work. So we'll just start with a loner deck of B Troopers and see how that works. For the accountability section, I'm still playing Dicey Dungeons. It is kind of a slow grind, and as I'm getting into the more difficult levels, even though I'm playing in relaxed mode, that there are definitely some such scenarios and episodes where I've died multiple times, and I have shifted from like a phase 1 of playing the game, in which I just play through all the levels and win on the first try, into more of a phase 2 where I'm playing each level once and then moving on. Okay. Increase the levels of all 6 monsters you currently control by 1. Okay. Right now I could special summon a 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. If I bring up the levels by 1, then I can special summon 1,000, 1,000. and a 1000, so I don't think any of those are actually useful. So, yep, end the turn there and just move on. You have to learn this whole new deck every time there's a new event. Or learn 3 new decks, really. Which I suppose that is the point. So yeah, I'm putting time into Dicey Dungeons, and I'm just trying to manage my time and see as much content as possible before I eventually just throw my hands up in the air and say, alright, well, there's a certain number of levels that are just impossible, which maybe there's not that many levels that are impossible, but that if I'm missing like 2, I could certainly get a shot of energy and try really hard to get those last 2 episodes done just for completionist sake. But if I'm missing, say, 6 out of 36 levels, then that's way too many. There's also separate levels like DLC that could potentially add another 36 levels twice over, so there might be 72 DLC extra levels in the game. And Dicey Dungeon is in a solely unique situation. I have never seen a game do this before, where you can straight up just edit the progress to some level. I didn't actually go far enough into it to see what you could edit, but unlocking the ability to play certain levels would be the minimum that I would assume it would do. Perhaps saying that you've won certain episodes when you haven't would be the extreme part of that. Or giving yourself straight up the achievements would be really extreme. But if I'm not going to play the game anymore anyways, just ruining the game and getting rid of all the stakes by cheating would be on the table for me. That's one of the things Mumbo Jumbo put out a video saying, if you're to avoid getting bored with Minecraft, never play in like creative mode or just command block load in things, because that removes all the stakes of the gameplay. See, as far as I've been a pretty good boy, I suppose, as far as just playing Dicey Dungeon. I've also been messing with my smart home some more and just being obsessed with smartifying my house even more. So I figured out on Tuya Smart Life Wi-Fi bulbs, they obviously when you flip a light switch, just regular old-fashioned light switch, you're cutting power to them, and then when you flip the switch back on, you're turning them on. They have a memory that can be programmed as to what they do at that point when they're turned on, and by default it's just turn it on to a bright white, the brightest whitest light that they can have, even though all these bulbs are color changing. Well, through the Smart Home Tuya app, you can trigger a scene from activating to activate when the device turns on, and in particular when the device turns on and it is at 100% brightness. So in one case I had bulbs that are scheduled to come on at like 1% brightness in the middle of the night as a night light. So the only time they'd be at 100% brightness is when you flip the switch. So with that bit of information you're getting, I realized you have a new functionality here that has never existed before. You can take a Tuya bulb on a light switch, the light switch that would assumedly be the one you switch when you walk on it into a room, and then you can check to see if that bulb is on at 100%, and then you can tell every other bulb in the room that might be plugged into a lamp, might be plugged into a different lamp switch, might be just plugged into, well, no, I guess it would have to be in a lamp to be plugged into an outlet. Like anything like that, you could tell all those bulbs, as long as they're powered and just in the off mode, but still getting power from the wall, you can then say turn those on too. Now, unfortunately, when you flip the switch off, there's no delay there, so it's not, and the TUI app doesn't allow you to detect when a device goes offline because it's just lost power. I wish it could do that. That would actually make it easier. So you can't do the converse where you flip the light switch off and turn off all the other bulbs in the room. Except for you can, and the trick there is because the bulbs have a timer that will turn it off automatically, you can turn all the secondary bulbs on and give them a timer of, say, 2 minutes, an hour, whatever you would want, and then they will just automatically turn off at that time, which that would be fine in many cases. Kids turn on a light switch. Sometimes I guess kids would maybe have to turn off a light switch then turn on a light switch, and that is a scenario you would want to try and avoid to trigger things, and then all the other lights in the room would stay on for a few minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and then they just turn off, and that would work fine as its own option. But you can do even better than that, because what you can do is you can make another scene that would check to see if the bulb's timers are below a minute, and then if the timer goes below a minute, you can set the timer to 2 minutes. Now it doesn't get into seconds, which over Wi-Fi the delay there would probably be a little bit, and there is a delay certainly. You'd flip a switch and then 10-15 seconds later all the other lights in the room would turn on. Not a big deal, but maybe if they were Zigbee they would move faster, but that's I haven't gone to Zigbee, and frankly I've committed so much to Wi-Fi devices, it'd be kind of crazy to go to Zigbee. And frankly, you do have this extra danger now, even though I do think Zigbee is probably the best protocol, that whatever is working with Zigbee now would get replaced with Thread Matter connectors, and it may be backward compatible, but it may not. So you may have a hard time finding devices that would work with Zigbee or Zigbee bridges in the future. Whereas Wi-Fi is a long-standing 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi is a long-standing technology, and it's going to stick around forever. So yes, the full programming of it would be you flip on a light switch, it turns on one light that is actually directly hardwired to that light bulb. You check that one light bulb to see if it's on. Then you turn all the other lights in the room on with a timer of 2 minutes. Then you make a second second scene to check to see if the timer is below a minute, and if it is below a minute and the first light bulb is still on and at 100%, so you check for both things, then you reset the timer to 2 minutes. That's going to cause that scene to activate every single minute, just giving it another minute and another minute. As soon as the light switch is flipped, then the bulb won't be on at 100% brightness, and the condition won't be met to reset the timer. the timer will run out, all the other light bulbs in the room go off after a minute or so there. Less than a minute, really. On top of that, the number of bulbs is actually quite a lot here, because more than likely you're going to flip a light switch that is a central lighting in the middle of your room, which usually has at least 2 bulbs in it, if not 4 bulbs in it. You only have to check to see if one of those bulbs is on. You don't need to check to see if all of them are. And then for all the other bulbs in the room, which could be 1, 2, well, I would say you probably would hit a maximum of 255, but before then you would run out of power in a room anyways. It would, but a more reasonable amount would be like 20-30 bulbs otherwise in the room at the most. But let's say you had 20 bulbs in the room. You don't have to check to see if all 20 of those bulbs timers are below 1. You only have to check with one of them on. And one of the things I have run into that has been a slight annoyance is that some of the Wi-Fi bulbs are a little bit too far to always have 100% connection to my Wi-Fi router. They sometimes lose connection. One bulb particularly that is far off in a corner seems to lose connection quite often. So yeah, you could check the one that is like the closest to the Wi-Fi router, the one that is the most consistent with this connection as far as its timer, and reset the timer for all the devices based on the timer of just one, which that speeds things up fairly nicely. I've gotten a new collection of bulbs that are lower wattage, and I'm going to try and compare them to... I had like 100 watt equivalent bulbs at the moment, and a couple of them have had some problems maintaining connection, and the brand that I got is just not available on Amazon anymore. It's probably all from the exact same factory in China, just being relabeled. But these bulbs claim to be 60 watt equivalents, so I wonder if that's going to be much of a difference, really. Particularly though, I got a big bulk pack for fixtures that would have 4 bulbs in it anyways. But I definitely have been known to put 100 watt bulbs in sockets that really should only have had 16 watt bulbs in them, and very possibly I've broken some sockets in fixtures by doing that, pulling too much current. There's at least 3, like 2 bathroom vanities that have a socket that's broken, and a ceiling fan that has a socket that's broken, and that could all be because I put too bright of bulbs in it. But everybody likes bright light, and LEDs really shouldn't be pulling that much current, although surprisingly they will. The other thing is, because I got a big 12 pack of bulbs, is I'm going to experiment with the similar system to what I just tried to explain. I hope I explained it well enough. And this has nothing to do with video games, in case you're wondering. But I have some motion sensors outside my house, and they are for like security lights. And then I have some lights that are not motion censored outside. It would make a lot of sense potentially to synchronize all of them, so when one bulb comes on because of a motion sensor, it would turn on the other bulbs because of a motion sensor. And I will have to think that one through a little bit, because obviously if you have 2 bulbs on motion sensor, then both those bulbs will be off when they don't see motion. And so you would have to determine which one you would want to put into an on always mode. The smarter move is there are some Tuya LED based floodlight motion sensor devices out there that are wired differently, and that's what you would really just replace them with. But I do think I might be able to at least make some level of adjustment there and get more use out of the bulbs. And that's what this really is just boiling down to, is what's the thing I can do to get more use out of light bulbs, because these smart light bulbs literally are adding a level of smartness to a technology that's only become like maybe a little bit more efficient and probably a lot more expensive when they went to like CFL bulbs and LED bulbs. Having the ability to turn on colored LEDs, having the ability to have like it respond to music on your phone, or having the ability to do patterns, all of that is just something that people really wouldn't have ever even dreamed of in the past. We see, oh, I can't even try to pronounce what looks like maybe a Taiwanese name, Korean name. He says, "Hi man, how you doing?" Oh, hello, I'm doing all right. Let's see, it could be Indian, certainly, too. It could be. I would definitely guess something West Asian. So yeah, that's my ramble as far as my smart home thought. Definitely in my Lego display room, I have a terrible situation in that room where there's literally one light switch to turn on a ceiling fan, and then floor lamps and other lamps are the only lighting in there. It's an incredibly dark room, so getting everything to turn on based on flipping that one bulb on will be very useful. I'm also thinking of perhaps putting some of even the bulbs in replacement bathroom vanity lights. Now ideally you would just have one device that was a bathroom vanity instead of putting in a standard light bulb socket vanity and then putting bulbs that are smart bulbs in it. But the only one I've seen of that's a smart, like, Wi-Fi controllable bathroom vanity is only like 24 inches long, which is a little too small for the uses I think I would use it for. There's not a lot of competition in that either. So yeah, if the one device didn't work, I wouldn't really have a replacement for it. And that is one problem with these Chinese Tuya smart devices, is that they are built relatively cheaply. So there is a level there of danger that you need to potentially replace one device with another device that's just programmed a little bit better or built a little bit better. Yep. Speaking of Lego, I usually don't talk about Lego, but the Lego Dot series has apparently been cancelled, which is not super surprising. It wasn't a very good series. It was kind of a dumb idea in the first place. Making entire sets that center around 1x1 studs, the thing that most people hate, or 1x1 studs, 1x1 squares, and 1x1 caps, and that's all Lego Dots were. it's no surprise people, and particularly kids, wouldn't be able to be that imaginative of it. It also brings you down from being able to make a 3D building block item down to building a 2D flat image, and that unlike the Lego Art series, which was way overpriced, at least the Lego Art series came with instructions to have a final product, where the Lego Dots were really just use your own imagination. And if anything, it's mean to say it, but Lego kids aren't the most creative kids in the world. Lego doesn't inherently encourage creativity so much in most kids. They just follow the instructions backwards and forwards, or they follow instructions to the letter and build this exact set that they're supposed to build, and then that set gets played with or gets put away. And that's exactly how I do almost all my Lego, is that I build the set and then I put it on display. Which kids have been doing similar things with model kits, all for many years. So it's not I'm not meaning to demean the kids by saying that. It's just, yeah, it's hardly as creative as giving a kid a pencil and paper and telling them to make something new. Now, them getting rid of the Lego Dot series comes out as kind of lucky for me, because I had made a couple of QR codes using the Lego Dot series and got those sets cheap 4 or 5 months ago. Whereas now, if I wanted to do the same gimmick, I would be very it'd be very difficult, if not impossible, to do that. There must be some more strategy to this. Yeah, I'm not really learning the strategy of these bee troopers. I've just gotten lucky and won a couple times. I mean, suppose we'll just take the biggest one. And then in the turn. Now, I will say that I have to think that maybe Twitter is starting to have some weirdness to it, because it felt like Twitter was telling me that I really had only gotten 17 new tweets in the past couple of days to look at. Maybe that's because it secretly pushed me back to the For You page. Maybe because it's secretly updated a bunch of the Twitter feed. But yeah, definitely doesn't feel like there's a lot of tweets in the past couple days. And then we have YouTube Gaming here, still being, in my opinion, incredibly inept here. Like, they just don't know what to do as far as YouTube Gaming, as to what they should be talking about, what they should be promoting, what is important, who would be following YouTube Gaming. YouTube Gaming, in a lot of ways, in their Twitter feed, I don't think they really even have much of a presence on YouTube themselves. I don't think they put out videos where that would potentially make sense, as if they had kind of a highlight page and they were talking about certain big people. I mean, obviously, if they were just saying, hey, this week Captain Sparkles was doing this, or this week PewDiePie was doing this, even if it was just their selection of people and creators on the rise for gamers in particular, big being highlighted. That would make a lot more sense. But instead you have YouTube Gaming here talking about which one do you miss the most. So you can't play any of these games to start with. Personally, I don't recognize any of these games. I recognize that these seem to all be Nickelodeon branded licensed games, but licensed games tend to be awful. So why in the world are you talking about this other than perhaps Nickelodeon paid YouTube Gaming to talk about this? But then even at that, I don't know why. Because I think for the most part, Nickelodeon doesn't want people to remember Teen Titans Go because they have more recent Teen Titans shows that they're trying to show. Home for Imaginary Friends is canceled. What was this one called? Operation something. And this lunchroom rumble, I don't even know what that is, but it looks probably like it might be a Ren and Stimpy type thing, or maybe a cat dog type thing. But I don't think any of these shows are in any way being rerun or being shown or being promoted. Wow. And then apparently something new happened 27 minutes ago. And then yeah, you scroll down more of their YouTube Gaming tweets and it's not much better. Here is a little bit better to highlight people. That's really probably what they should do 100%. But they're constantly trying to get engagement and constantly coming off as incredibly pathetic because of it. Although on a certain level, I also just don't think I would want people at YouTube to try to be celebrities themselves and try to have successful channels. It might be better if they did try that and then failed miserably and then realized that they've created a system where the vast majority of people do fail and are treated poorly and try to fix that, although they wouldn't do that, would they? Anybody with an inside track would cheat and give themselves special privileges and special views. In a lot of ways, it's like the Scrooge, the Scrooge story, Christmas Carol story, where you could just hope that the YouTube Gaming or people working at YouTube would be visited by three ghosts and see the poverty and the struggles other people have. Probably rambling here. Somebody else on the chat, Geo says, when the Battle of Chaos comes to Master Duel. Is that supposed to be a question or is that a statement? I don't even know. I don't know what Battle of Chaos specifically means. Anyway, so. I feel like there's something here between these two that's going to cause something to happen. Why would that level that up? Just a ton of just a ton of weirdness happening here. Okay, well that did damage, and I guess that's the best I can hope for. I had talked about how Censored Gaming had not put up a video on his YouTube channel in a long time. He, I suppose, had been retweeting somewhat. But let's see if he posts his actual thing. I kind of speculated that maybe he had lost his Play Asia and advertisement, or sponsorships. If anything, it does seem like he tweeted a little bit, and so I kind of thought maybe he just, I don't know, given up on it or something. He did finally put out a video a couple yesterday or so, maybe a day ago, 2 days ago. He's somewhat vague around his own private details, which I don't particularly hate. It seems to be fairly obvious, though, that he was sick with something. Maybe it was COVID, just like a long-term COVID thing. Maybe it was some other long-term sickness, and that has hurt him. He also seems like he has been basically moved out of where he lives, so I don't know if he was he had like a visa situation, or broke up with a girlfriend's wife, or moved out of the parents' house, or moving back into the parents' house, things like that. So yeah, he's admitted in his statement here, which he has attached a transcript here of his video, which I wish kind of you could do that for all videos, that he's going to try for more transparency and have a personal Twitter. He's trying to get people to support him on Patreon. I don't think I would attribute anything shady going on here. I do think he probably is just really struggling, and certainly it's up to each individual person whether you want to support through a Patreon or something like that a content creator who hasn't made a video in many months, who is now coming out of the blue asking for support. Ironically, there is another much bigger YouTube channel that is doing something very similar, and it makes me suspect that with the new changes to the YouTube partner program, that there aren't quite a few channels out there that have been slacking and just not getting their viewership up, their number of views, their number of subscribers high enough to make the kind of money they would want to make, or to just stay in the partner program in general, because you do have to have a certain number of watch hours in a certain amount of time. I think it is over a rolling 365 days. And the channel that I'm going to call out directly here is Pure Life for Living, which some people, and I'll try to be as neutral on this, suspected that channel, back when it was doing what it was originally popular for, was really doing more of a scam or a bait and switch, at least as a YouTube channel, because they went from building their own homestead and building their own house without really knowing what to do, and learning as they go, to a channel that started to talk more and more about growing vegetables and having a home garden and canning and getting a pilot's license and flying a plane. And they really stopped doing any progress on the actual house. And that was certainly at least the first thing that I think irritated a lot of people. Although there was a lot of people even before that point that were irritated in the way that they were building the house and seemingly not listening to any advice as far as the right way to build a homestead. But I think also some of that could be excused by the fact that the videos, once they were put out, were probably actions that were done months, if not years earlier. It definitely seemed like there was a level of delay on it. Well, Pure Life for Living as a YouTube channel has been completely dead for at least a year, if not 2-3 years. Just nothing really new posted there. Actually, I think pretty much no new videos at all posted at all. And with the increased silence, there was a increased disappointment, if not just straight hate, around Pure Life for Living, because they didn't really finish the house or finish the project, compared to, say, the abandoned mansion project by another YouTuber who bought an abandoned mansion and fully rebuilt it and added to it over the course of a year to maybe 2 at most, and that worked perfectly, and he got no hate really, as far as I could see, by just having the project be finished. Let's see. Well, Pure Life for Living, having not put out any new videos, I have to assume was either in danger of losing ad revenue or monetization there, or had lost it and wanted to get it back. So now they've come back and started posting, but what they're posting has basically nothing to do with the idea of building the house or finishing the house or anything like that. The first couple of videos, again, were talking about home gardening, and there was 2 videos on that, and then they come back and now they've heavily started posting videos and just community forum posts around saying that they were bullied and stalked off of YouTube, and so all of a sudden Pure Life for Living is no longer about anything it has been before. The channel has changed its logo, and now it's just straight up, this is a channel about how we got bullied and how we're promoting anti-bullying, anti-cyberstalking campaigns, playing the victim, certainly. And yes, of course, that there is some of that for a lot of celebrities, and it's crazy to call them celebrities, but that's the closest equivalent of what you could describe them as. But it certainly isn't going to appeal to the people who originally just wanted to see him build a house. As someone who just wanted to see what he was doing and what he was learning from building a homestead, building a house that didn't really require any permits or anything like that, off the grid somewhat, that was my interest of Pure Life for Living. I have very little interest in this incredibly cryptic stay tuned. It's basically like Corey Feldman saying he was going to name all the Hollywood pedophiles for years and years and years, and yet he never really did it. And he named one name of somebody who was old and who had already died, and people already knew was a pedophile. He's not Corey Feldman always perhaps implying that he was going to name bigger names. So it's a very weird situation, certainly, and I can't help but to feel like it's a scam. That it's a scam designed to appeal to people like Susan Wojcicki, who would love to retweet bullying, an anti-bullying, anti-cyberstalking message, and white knight that message regardless of how accurate or true it is. But I think it mostly is just trying to get people to watch their channel without them actually having to make any new content. And I can't blame them for stopping to make content. I can definitely blame them for coming back and trying to do something different. It seems like there's another project called because you see in one of the videos, he's wearing all this clothing that says KERF. That I think I saw was another business venture of his. One of the accusations certainly around the Pure Life for Living is that they were actually fairly rich and they were doing it more for YouTube videos, and it did kind of come off like that instead of being the down-to-earth things. Like, you're not going to be able to own a plane usually if you don't have a certain level of richness on top of building a house. But I can't blame him for having like kids and getting busy and just doing that. It would have been a lot smarter, frankly, if they had just gone to family life blogging and tried to be as good about that as possible. Like, certainly that's a dark side of YouTube when you have parents using their kids for likes and views, but it probably wouldn't have been too bad had they 2 or 3 times each year put out like a Christmas letter and put out like a Christmas family picture, and even if they blurred the kids' faces completely and just said happy holidays and just said we did a bunch of stuff because of being new parents, and that's why we couldn't make any videos, but we're still here and we still appreciate all the support. Instead, what they're basically doing is attacking their audience, because at a certain level, Pure Life for Living's audience is only people who are hate watching it after they stopped making new content. All the people who were love watching it got bored and moved on. Speaking of getting bored and moving on, I should move on, since that too has nothing to do with video games. Now, the good news is I can ramble like this fairly well because there's not a lot of new news. But yeah, I do need to move forward. I probably need to try a different deck also. Unless there's some trick to having these guys point towards other guys, which would probably be the right move always. Let's see. There's just so much learning you would have to do around this deck as far as figuring out which cards you should send to the graveyard and for what reason. It'll save me time to basically activate everything I can activate early. Alright, well, let's start going through the Video Games Chronicle article. One of the things is, as I was talking to Sniper Ranger in the last stream, I was showing off or not showing off adult content, and he's probably the first person who's ever stayed late enough to actually see and comment on the fact that I've been going through adult games on Steam. He's the first one to comment. One of the things, though, is when I have the web peak, which is what I call this, and I have to turn that off, and I'm talking about games that came out on Steam, I am just coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And more, as I'm trying to get a better handle of this, I'm mostly just rambling and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And not talking about video game news until about an hour into the stream. And then what's happening is I'm just giving up on Yu-Gi-Oh! After about an hour and not returning to it. So there is a procedure here where I could set it up where this would be more of a blurred version of this. instead of showing Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though I still would want Yu-Gi-Oh! For the background music, otherwise it's just going to be annoying to hear me talk with no subtle background music going on. At least I think that's the case. I'd be surprised if I got feedback that people said actually being in total silence makes more sense. At a certain level, every podcast does do that, though. But most podcasts have at least 2, if not 3 or 4 people talking on the microphone to cover the dead air. If I didn't have background music, as a single person who sometimes goes silent for a few seconds or a minute or two, I could definitely see it becoming annoying to have that dead air. Yeah, just like that. If I went total silent like this and there was nothing there, that would become very noticeable. So yeah, I am definitely giving some thought to that. I would prefer to be able to show the adult content blurred, but it would require a switch of some sort, and the trigger to that switch is the thing I'm trying to think of. Probably it would be something like a hotkey that would turn off the video source for Magic the Gathering, and then I'd have to press a key on my keyboard to switch what's happening and what isn't happening. But that would work, certainly. And the blur filter ideally wouldn't be too big of a CPU hog. I don't think it would be. Anyways, I need to talk about video game news. We had already talked about the House of the Dead remake. I kind of hope it succeeds when it comes out on PC. I think it's maybe already out on PC. Yeah, it is. It's coming out on PlayStation 5, which there definitely is a question around what's the difference between a PS4 version of a game and a PS5 version of the game, particularly when you're talking about a remake that was really remade for the Switch, or a remaster for the Switch. It's just, I'm not sure if there is that much of a difference. Let's play it with a different deck. We may find out this other loner deck is better. We have already started fairly nicely with some victories. Let's just hope those victories last all the way to at least 1100, although 1600 is more ideal. If I don't get this Danger Bigfoot icon here, will I never be able to get it? That might be the case, but also I kind of don't care. So I think we'd also talked about PlayStation showing off its most exciting games in a new trailer. The new Last of Us HBO trailer teases what's to come in future episodes. I feel like all of these articles may be a little old. There is an interesting question, and I'm going to have to just try and remember the number off the top of my head. I think the number of views that the Last of Us HBO TV show got was 4.7 million. Now, 4.7 million is a big number, but not a giant number. If it is even a tenfold error and it actually was 47 million, that's a big number. But I don't know if that's really... Well, I mean, that would probably... 47 million people watching HBO, that would be kind of a huge number. But yeah, I think it was 4.7 million. That being said, Monster Hunter Sunrise which is a spin-off of a popular series, but not particularly popular in the West, has sold 8 million games, 8 million copies. I'm fairly certain we get quite a few games that have sold more than 4.7 million copies. So you definitely are comparing apples to oranges in a lot of different ways. But it does, I think, highlight the differences in how you would count and what would be important and what wouldn't be important in TV and video games. Because the long tail sales of TV is pretty much impossible to count. Like, if another 10-20 million people watched The Last of Us 6 months from now, that wouldn't be counted. If The Last of Us gets DVD sales, that wouldn't be counted. So I don't know what I'm doing, obviously. But yeah, there's just no way to really combine the 4.7 million thought. Let's activate this first and compare that to the sales you would get for a video game for The Last of Us. Just attach a banished card as material. And then end the turn. I guess what I should do here is run the numbers and just Google it myself. So I'm going to go Last of Us sales numbers and Google it. So here we have The Last of Us has sold over 20 million units, and this is an article before February 21st, 2020. So 20 million copies sold for The Last of Us first game. And then here we have HBO's post huge numbers with debut in comparison at 4.7 million viewers. Alright, so I was right. I did remember correctly. So yeah. First people to watch the first episode, 1/4 of the number of people who would have bought the first game before even the second game is out. I imagine that number is actually a lot higher now. Plus, you're still comparing apples to oranges in that people paid $60 for The Last of Us Part 1, plus they paid for a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 3, which would have been about $500. So you're talking $560 invested in to play Last of Us Part 1 and probably a few other games. Whereas to get HBO, maybe you're paying, I'd hate to think you're paying $60 just to get HBO, but you probably are paying $20 to $30 a month to get HBO. And yes, there are a couple that are HBO shows, but the point there being The Last of Us TV show, for every one of its viewers, is probably only getting maybe $5. Yeah. Maybe you could get $60 out of a single viewer of the Last of Us TV show if they stick around for the whole series. Well, that played poorly. So that is an extremely long way to point out that it kind of doesn't matter how successful a video game to TV show is. It may be big number for TV production or streaming services or movies, but it's not really big numbers for video games. Video games make more money than TV or movies or anything. They are the number one profitable form of entertainment. And only through a lot of Hollywood accounting and a lot of audience retention desire does it make any sense at all to have a TV show exist, whereas video games can just get you to pay $60 up front and then they don't have to do anything else. If you lose half of your audience for The Last of Us Part 2, The Last of Us HBO TV show, in Episode 2, if Episode 2 goes bad and they lose half of their audience, they're maybe in some trouble, maybe they're not. It depends on if HBO gets people unsubscribing to their service or not. But then there's also an incredibly large amount of weirdness around these TV production series, in that you can have an incredibly successful show on Netflix and then it still gets canceled, or you can have an incredibly bad show on Netflix and yet somehow it's still around and still very popular. Oh darn it, I could have probably special summoned something from the graveyard if I didn't have the character on the field. I don't know why I'm succeeding here either. So that's really a long way to just say, as a video game critic, it's incredibly difficult to spread out and consider TV and as part of the equation, or consider a movie as the equation. Mostly it's easiest just to write off TV and movies. Moving on with news, and this will probably be the last game we play. Splatoon 3 is going to get a large update today with a focus on battle adjustments. Splatoon 3 is still a thing. It doesn't feel like people are as big of fans of Splatoon 3. Arguably, maybe they should have waited a few more months before putting out a Pokemon game to give Splatoon 3 more of a chance. Yeah, if I was going to spend the time, which I'm not, it'd be interesting to see the release dates of like Splatoon 3 and then Arceus and then Scarlet and Violet, because it kind of feels like they might be speeding up a little bit to get as many first-party Nintendo games out as possible. They also were kind of catching up with republishing a lot of Wii U games at the beginning. They're probably done with that at this point. That gun barely even looked like a squirt gun. Sniper rifle squirt gun. But yeah, they I would suspect that we may have a mid-year or late-year announcement of a Switch 2, and at that point, once the announcement happens, we stop seeing a lot of first-party titles coming out. At a certain level, maybe the Metroid Prime remakes, which aren't aren't showing up in Metroid Prime 4, which isn't showing up. Maybe all of that is just going to be on the Switch 2. Maybe Breath of the Wild 2 would be on the Switch 2. Like, you could see a lot of Nintendo's ambitious projects being very possibly just too ambitious for the likes of the Switch, and that they may just have to straight up admit that they can't really make the games they need to make with the Switch 1, and they're going to just pivot a lot of releases to the Switch 2. Well, the good news on this is you at least get 50 of these tokens every time you lose. It's funny, you only get 50 gems here. Yeah, you're getting significantly reduced amounts of gems. They need to be more generous, not less generous, and nobody really cares about legacy packs at all. 21 things have now been done, and this will give us some gems. Activating spells and traps cards, special summoning monsters, normal summoning monsters, and dueling. And so there's at least 24 more duels that need to happen. As far as daily quests, all the daily quests are done. As far as login, all of that is done. I'm off the schedule with the dual lives, I think, also. And yes, at some point in the next 12 days I also need to do a daily quest solo mode video. I basically need to do the solo mode video every month, which ideally means I need to have at least 30, if not 40,000, 4,000 or 3,000 gems. Video Games Chronicle says a leaked Suicide Squad image appears to confirm a battle pass and more. This image in particular doesn't seem to show anything about a battle pass. It just really seems to be emphasizing Harley Quinn's butt, which kind of at this point I think Harley Quinn isn't even that focused on in DC. So even the Suicide Squad game is more going around the movies or just delayed from what the comics are. Not that comics really should be the main connective tissue to the DC universe. There is a new person in charge, and this game certainly was in development before the new person at DC was in charge. And then there is DC being acquired by AT&T and all of that mess. So it is very possible that Suicide Squad is good and nothing comes from it because of the change of leadership. It's possible it's bad, and then the new leaders can just blame the people in charge before. Now, I did hear that this battle pass, yeah, it even says here, sources tell Video Games Chronicles that it's dedicated to cosmetics, which at a certain point, then don't call it a battle pass. Battle pass already has negative connotation to it. Call it a cosmetics pass or vanity pass, something like that. Just make a new term. That would be better advertising. It wouldn't be super crazy. You see it in Japanese games every now and then, particularly the lewd Japanese games, where it's here's a collection of costumes that don't make any sense in the story line, but we still wanted to give you the option to put them in bikini if they wanted to. I'm sure plenty of people would be happy with Harley Quinn in a Harley Quinn style two-piece bikini as far as cosmetics, and I suspect that's gonna be some of what the cosmetics are. You might get some different style of outfits for different characters, but nobody's really gonna care about like Captain Boomerang being in a lot of different variety of outfits. It's gonna be mostly looting on the female Harley Quinn character and nobody else. A leaked Hogwarts Legacy art book reportedly reveals the game's length and other information. I think it would probably be pretty silly to care about that. People are very hyped around Hogwarts Legacy, and unless it's said that the game is super short, which it doesn't seem like it would be a short game, people will probably be happy with its length. Metal Gear Rising's voice actor claims announcements are coming in the coming weeks. This is in response to a question, I think, on Twitter, which you have really no reason. He tweeted a video advertising his Cameo page, and then he's just trying to get as much press for himself. I wouldn't be surprised for a second if he is totally making this up. The voice actor is making up that there will be announcements, or that he's just stupid and confused and something is coming. He thinks something is coming, but it really isn't anything. Or that Konami is going to take insult in that he announced something without their permission and they cancel whatever might have been coming because he leaked information. That would be a very Konami thing to do. Or Konami is lying to him. Any of those is frankly more believable at this point than the idea that the voice actor who played Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2, 4, and Rising is going to actually have an announcement of some new Metal Gear game in the coming weeks. Now, it's possible Konami is trying to do some stuff there. And it's not the worst response, really, to just tease. But I would prefer to say stay tuned and not give an actual date, because coming weeks means 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, then it would be the coming months. So yeah, this is the kind of story that would be a much bigger story if the voice actor actually had something to say and actually was talking directly to a news source, because Video Games Chronicles, Kotaku, Bloomberg, Gaming Division, any of them would have been more than happy to take his information and then make him an anonymous source if they were going to put out a bigger article about a new Metal Gear game. Metal Gear is definitely one of those games also like Silent Hill, and it may be no coincidence that they're both Konami games, where if you're going to start to put out Metal Gear games again, I have no idea how you would play that series from the beginning not knowing anything, because I've never played a Metal Gear game. I don't think I could play Metal Gear 1, which I think was an NES or Super NES game. I maybe could get 2 or 3 on Steam, but I know you could probably get 4 or 5. I don't know about Rising. There would have to be a full-on reboot, basically, to keep my attention or get me introduced to the weird world that exists in the Metal Gear series. That's why trilogies are frankly the best way to do things. Is 3 games is not too much of a commitment, but once you start to get to 4, 5, 6 games with spin-offs, it is way too much of a commitment for new players. A new Wulong Fallen Destiny trailer focuses on the game's story. I think we had already seen this trailer or heard about this trailer, but check it out on Video Games Chronicles if you're interested. The Switch topped the US console unit sales in 2020 as wider industry sales declined 5%. So does that mean that the Switch declined 5% also? Or did they all decline on average 5%? So yeah, the Switch is still selling great. So it would, if you were to just look at those numbers, it would be kind of silly for them to announce the Switch 2. In particular, though, if they announce the Switch 2 and it is just not portable, then there's definitely still an argument to sell Switches, sell Switch Lites. Um, if they announce something that's like an Xbox Series S, and then the Joy Cons are extra, and no controllers are included, that would be something that I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that, where you have to own a Switch first before you could get the Switch 2 dock. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Switch 2 really is just a super dock that takes this cheap plastic dock and adds a major amount of CPU processing and GPU processing to play games better. I did see something from CES that was interesting as a new kind of solid state cooling fan for CPUs. This has potential uses. I think they were calling it the AirJet from a company, I think it was called Fora, something like that. But if the technology actually works and it's actually not incredibly expensive, we may start to see products in the next couple of years that instead of having giant CPU fans and motors to blow air across things, you might have these small, they look like a stick of gum basically, pieces of equipment that are replacements for fans. It's not liquid cooling. I'm not sure what the technology really was. It's some kind of membranes that can blow air at like 120 miles per hour. So it's just really, really massive amounts of air, and it's blowing the air downward towards the metal heat spreader at the bottom of the device instead of blowing air acrossward, so you don't get a pocket of air at the bottom that's hot while the top air at the higher parts would be flowing faster. They were calling that like a barrier level, which, yeah, that kind of makes some sense. It was a good sales pitch as far as a potential new technology. Of course, it could also not exist, come about. But as far as other technologies into consoles, like cooling probably is the thing to be upgraded. Get a Switch 2 that has ray tracing and is just way more powerful CPU and GPU wise still would probably not be that powerful. It would be interesting if the Switch 2 tried to be better than the Steam Deck, and they felt some real competition there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. A Switch 2 is still underpowered compared to a Steam Deck, and Steam Decks aren't that powerful. So, yeah, if they are just making another portable device, it probably won't be very exciting. But if they make something completely different, it might be exciting. If they came out with VR, that would be interesting at least. But they've tried with VR before, and it didn't sell. Like, because they had that whole Labo cardboard thing where you built a VR cardboard headset and put the Switch's screen in the cardboard to make a VR experience, and that didn't work. Let's see. Moving on, January's PlayStation Plus games catalog and classic titles have been released. Check that out, I guess, if you're interested. There's a decent list here. I don't know what Omno or Erica is as a game, and that's a little surprising that there'd even be two games that I don't recognize. PlayStation Store's most downloaded games of 2022 have been revealed. It includes Modern Warfare 2, FIFA 23, God of War Ragnarok, Beat Saber, and Fall Guys. Beat Saber, perhaps the only one that kind of stands out there in that it's a VR exclusive. whereas the rest of these games are just the exact same games that sold the best for PlayStation. If anything, it probably just highlights that PlayStation users in particular are fairly confident around they're fairly confident around the idea of downloading instead of trying to trade games and keep physical discs. Sniper Ranger's on the chat. He says yellow. Hi. So yeah, it is weird that the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 got a big boost around saying you could trade games when Xbox Series 1 and Microsoft in general was trying to get it to the point where you couldn't trade used games. And yet it seems like while people want that as a feature, people don't actually think of that as a feature on the PlayStation as much these days. It is just so convenient to download something, and most people aren't trading in games. Particularly if you have a PlayStation 5, you're rich at that point, so why would you waste your time trading in a game or trading in with friends? I did see something on Reddit, and this doesn't inherently have anything to do with video games, but there is also just a lack of hanging out that is increasing amongst people. Like, people are not going out to bars and hanging out. They're not going to games. They're working from home, so they're not hanging out with coworkers that much. So it's getting more and more difficult for people to form friendships or maintain friendships. So obviously, if you're in general losing those in-person relationships and interactions, that would reduce the number of times that people would come over to your house and you might lend them a PlayStation game or trade with them that way, which that is the best way to trade games, is amongst friends, because at least there you're not getting screwed over by somebody like GameStop that's going to give you store credit or a pathetic amount of cash. Moving on, a union calls on Ubisoft Paris workers to strike after worrying CEO comments. Yves Guillemot has been accused of shifting the blame for his company's troubles onto employees. This definitely sounded like what he was saying. I can't really white knight or support him on that case. Although what he really said is not really out of line from what many CEOs and people in charge say in annual meetings, is that, and if anything, it felt like he was not talking to employees at an associate level as much as he was talking to managers. So the way I took it when he said everybody needs to tighten their belts, and I'm paraphrasing here, and be careful about their budgets and work hard to keep everything on budgets. I took that as he was talking to middle management to do that, because associate level people don't have any control over the budget anyways. Now, French unions love to strike anyways, and striking after the statements of somebody seems like it's a bit extreme in my opinion. You're weakening the power of your strike by going on strike too often, and if anything, the union and the strike at Ubisoft might be too weak already. You should be holding your strikes like a nuclear option when you're negotiating contracts for pay and better benefits for the employees. If they were to go on strike right now, if they were really to go on strike now, what is the thing you're trying to get to happen here. Basically, it's just to force Guillemot to lie to you and make a half-hearted apology, and they're calling for a half-day strike, which on Friday. So basically, they're saying take your Friday off early. Yeah, that's a little too emotional, frankly, for my liking for a union. Like, yes, it would be fine if the union was just going to put out a strongly worded letter or a statement, but to call for a half-day strike just because somebody said the CEO said something nasty is a little ridiculous. The French are a passionate people, a hot-blooded people, to say the least. So, yeah, that you can see why they might do that, but it's not a smart move. Not a smart move at all. It's going to cause more fighting and more problems. Although at a certain point, I'm not sure if the union cares, because they're already, I think, really, really mad at Ubisoft and just trying to burn it to the ground anyways. But yeah. There's nothing that's really going to come about from that. That's a bad reason to strike. Good reasons to strike are because you're negotiating a better contract for better salary, better conditions, or because the management fired or is trying to fire somebody or do some kind of union busting or implement some kind of incredibly restrictive, unfair rules. Something like that. Something that actually would directly affect the associates more than just hurting their feelings. Inherently, if you're in a job that needs a union, the management are jerks. That is basically the foundation of a union existing. Unions pretty much never exist if you have this imaginary saint boss character that treats everybody nice and says nice things all the time. Like, a union would never form under that way. Now, there are some fake news stories out there where management and bosses try to play it off like that is the case, where the boss is so generous and so nice that he helps them form a union and then the whole business falls apart. Those are not true stories. It never happened. Stuff like that, but yeah. But yeah, you if you get into a job, and I always give this as a suggestion, particularly in the United States, if you get into a job and there's a union, there's a decent argument to turn around and quit at that point, because the existence of a union tells you that this is going to be a rough fight. You're going to have to fight for your rights every turn. There are going to be very mean managers who are going to try to do everything they can to document bad things you did wrong that aren't real, and just stitch you up and write you up all over the place, so that they always have this justification to fire you. And it's just going to be a much more hostile work environment than what other jobs without unions are. Now, unfortunately, a lot of jobs don't have unions, and it's still incredibly hostile work environments, but it's pretty much a guarantee in a union job. On the other hand, if you're willing to tough it out, if you're young and dumb, a union job can keep you employed for a long time and get you a lot better pay and a lot better benefits. So you have to really think about it. Moving on. Forspoken's PlayStation 5 demo has been updated. PC features and requirements detailed. I assume this game is not going to ask for 84 gigabytes of hard drive space. Noticeably here, the article isn't bothering to go into any details. Unless there's something wrong with this page and it didn't load all the way through. Yeah. I don't know what this link here is all about. this may be Twitter's third-party apps being shut down even more. I would think that may very well be what's going on here, is that Video Games Chronicles was linking to Twitter articles. And yeah, if Twitter shuts down, a significant portion of web pages are going to be broken at that point. The embedded Twitter links that people were quoting, particularly news sites that weren't really doing a lot of news reporting, they weren't ever hosting those tweets. They were always embedding them, so entire articles throughout the internet will be broken. Yeah. Now, that would be interesting. It would be a way of marking a lot of pages as old and less relevant, too. If you go to a website and all of a sudden there's a bunch of embedded Twitter links that are broken. I think this actually came out and was confirmed. Microsoft was reportedly set to announce thousands of layoffs on Wednesday. Update: Microsoft has confirmed it plans to lay off approximately 10,000 employees. So I can't help but think that this is probably in part Microsoft admitting that they are not going to get the Activision Blizzard acquisition through. Like, this is the exact thing that makes Microsoft look untrustworthy to acquire Activision Blizzard. Now, this did kind of need to happen, in my opinion. Like, Microsoft is a big mega corporation, and they've been acquiring companies left and right and not touching any of the middle management, any of the managers, and just redundant people. Now, is it the associate level employees or the managers getting laid off? We will probably never know, but there is undoubtedly a lot of redundancy in Microsoft, and particularly in the gaming division with them acquiring so many game companies, but also just in the software division and other divisions that Microsoft has. Like, Microsoft basically needs to be a skeleton crew to run Windows, and because there's always just these new features that nobody wants and new visual changes that nobody wants for Windows 11, which nobody really even wanted Windows 11. So if they get rid of all the people who are just wasting their time changing the appearances and adding features that nobody wants, and they only keep the people who are bug fixing and adding features that people actually do want, which is basically just better DirectX and better, smoother core system utilities, the networking features and the file management features. That's basically it. They'd keep their Edge team, but even that should be a skeleton crew. And yes, they have the whole Azure like server side stuff, and that would be more of their development team. But yeah, there's definitely probably more than 10,000 employees that could be laid off there. Let's see. I suspect also Microsoft's quarterly fiscal quarters are coming up, so laying off 10,000 employees probably looks better on the books. 10,000 employees is, well, it seems like it's actually going to be 11,000 employees, 5% of their total person workforce. They have 220,000 employees, which is just a massive amount. What and I assume this is all their subsidiaries too, and that this isn't just 220,000 people working at Microsoft alone. So it's 5% of your workforce, which, yeah, put 100 people in a room in any office. I think you could pick 5 people that don't do enough work or don't do good work and get rid of them. That wouldn't be hard. I've definitely been in jobs where I could have potentially laid off at least half of the number of employees. Who's to say also that they won't go on a hiring spree. Some of these jobs definitely are in the engineering divisions, too. They laid off 1,000 employees in October of 2022. Yeah, its second quarter earnings is announced on January 24th, so this literally could just be laying off people before they announce bad sales numbers for January. That would be my assumption. So I guess your bet might be to short the stock on Microsoft, but I definitely wouldn't suggest that because the stocks may usually go up after layoffs. Honestly, now would be the time to buy Microsoft stock because in the long run, the layoffs will make the price go up. But yeah, I bet they could find another 20,000 employees to get rid of, though. It's a big number because it's a big company. Should companies be that big? No, absolutely not. But if I was the person in charge of the world, I would make companies incredibly small and get rid of the idea of shareholders in total and make all companies be sole proprietorships. I would split Microsoft into probably like 20,000 at max employees businesses, and every division of Microsoft would become its own individual business, fighting and operating independently if I could do that. And yes, that would make them less efficient, and less efficiency means they would need more employees and stop people from getting laid off. Although inherently you do get into the question of, do you want to keep all your citizens employed forever for all of eternity, or do you just want to finally give up the ghost and admit to that universal basic income makes some sense and just pay citizens for being happy citizens and let automation take over their jobs, because automation could do a lot of people's jobs. Moving on, John Wick director signs up for Rainbow Six movie starring Michael B. Jordan. Which, yeah, you gotta be careful how I read that, because it's not 6 Rainbow Six movies, it's 1 Rainbow Six movie. Of course, the problem with anybody signing up for any movie is just like, yes, they can commit to that and then they can back out on it very easily. The film is going to be a sequel to last year's Without Remorse, which I don't even know what Without Remorse is. I totally missed that. Oh, I guess it was an Amazon Prime Video that I just totally missed. And there's no reason whatsoever that they would be a Rainbow Six Extraction WWE DLC trailer. We still really haven't gotten any kind of confirmation on what's going on with the WWE. There's a lot of rumors, certainly, and there is definitely a possibility that WWE is going to be bought out by somebody, whether it is the Saudi Arabia Public Interest Fund or whether it's Disney or somebody else. Let's see. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak clears 5 million units. This is the game that it is very much a niche game, middle of the road game, a side game to the Monster Hunter series, which is very popular in Japan but relatively unknown in the West. And yes, yet is sold 5 million units at probably about $60 each, compared to the first episode of The Last of Us on HBO getting 4.7 million views in the first couple of days, and people not paying anywhere close to $60 to watch that first episode. Sackboy is the next PlayStation series coming to mobile. The free-to-play running game is released globally next month. Sackboy and an Infinite Runner does not really sound like anything of any real interest. It's visually interesting. It's got that Yoshi's Woolly World visual aesthetic to it, but there really is only so many games like that that I'd be willing to play, and most of them, I think all of them would have to be Nintendo games. But an Infinite Runner is the main problem with that idea. We just talked about this. Microsoft laying off 10,000 employees. I doubt it's Phil Spencer or Major Nelson or anybody big getting laid off. Phil Spencer says game companies must, quote, turn away from dividing players and creators, honor our differences, and practice empathy. Finally, somebody speaks some sense. I hope that he means those words in the way that they are said, and he doesn't mean that in some other way. The problem here is that some of the SJW woke agenda is on one side versus some of it is on the other side. So, like, turning away from dividing players and creators could be taken by some people as saying, well, players just need to stop being so mean to creators, and you could twist it that way if you really squint. Honoring the differences could be twisted to say we need more censorship and rules on chat for online players so that players aren't harassing other players, which is not even what they would be talking about, but I can see people twisting that and quote mining that. And practice empathy, same thing. It could be twisted and used as a way of just pushing more censorship in multiplayer against players versus players. But I will take it on face value as far as what Phil Spencer is. I do agree with this idea. There has been an increasing amount, and really Phil Spencer could have been talking about something completely different because these are very generic ideas. How even game creators even take that message, if they even listen to them, is going to be questionable. But yeah, we really need to stop with the whole drama. Even like the Dead Space remake, I feel like, and this may be just a face capture problem, but the Dead Space remake feels like it's doing that Horizon Zero Dawn thing, in which they're just making fatter, uglier faces on women for a bad reason. If face capture technology just is incredibly bad for women for some reason, which it may very well be, it may just pick up shadows more when they do the face scanning. They just need to go back to the old style, frankly. They just need to handcraft like good looking faces on people, on women, because in video games we want the characters to look good, both guys and girls, and we don't want them to be realistic, and we don't want them to have realistic body proportions or fat proportions. There is not an argument amongst actual gamers that they want to see more representation or more diversity of body types in the cartoon animated characters. We want good looking muscly barbarian characters, or we want crazy skeleton characters. I don't want a fat skeleton character. And that has been one of the things, certainly, that's been a problem. But then there's also just been a lot of ridiculous things, and a lot of the ridiculous things are happening less and less commonly recently, but we're still seeing some of it. The Saints Row reboot, another great example, just stereotypical of like cookie cutter characters that were sold as being hipsters and like woke hipsters instead of being sold as gangsters that people could like first and foremost. Of course, that wasn't even the worst problem with the Saints Row game. Moving on, I really need to hurry up here. The Returnal PC release date, specs, and features trailer has been revealed, according to Video Games Chronicles. I can't even read this. Let's see. If we click here, can we get it bigger? Yes. 1070 if you want it at 1080 60, an i5 8400, 6 cores at 2.8 gigahertz, or a Ryzen 5 2600, 6 cores at 3.4 gigahertz. That's a pretty big difference. 16 gigabytes of RAM and 60 gigabytes of storage SSD required for medium settings, which, yeah, this is getting really ridiculous as far as just what the requirements are going, particularly for storage space. I guess if I was going to play Returnal, which Returnal always felt like it was a little bit of a poorly optimized game, I could probably do this. Yeah. I could probably do recommended 1080p 60 at high graphic settings, but I don't think I could do 4K, which I'd never do that anyways, or 4K with ray tracing. Like, ray tracing doesn't actually even need more RAM. It seemingly needs just more video card RAM at 12 gigabytes instead of 10 gigabytes. Yep. There definitely is an argument for video cards to start putting twice as much RAM in their devices if they want to improve, but that would cost a lot. Looking at those specs, though, that is quite a lot for a game that maybe doesn't justify needing that much, particularly 60 gigabytes of space. Yeah, we're getting potentially to a point where if games are going to ask for nearly 128 gigs of space on an SSD, they're potentially asking you to own an extra $100 worth of storage space just for that one game to be installed and left installed. That is a lot, and while Returnal is somewhat of a visual experience, it's not that amazing of a visual experience. It's actually very dark and not actually visually appealing to me. Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2 season details revealed as the launch is delayed. Check that out on Video Games Chronicles if you're interested. The Ubisoft CEO reportedly apologizes to devs for the ball is in your court comment. Yves Guillemot has seemingly suggested the onus was on the staff to reverse the course of the fortunes. So yeah, perhaps the strike did work, or the threat of a strike did work to make him lie to them and fake an apology. I doubt for a single second that he is actually sorry. It definitely felt like it was probably a statement he was making to the middle management, and I definitely don't think he really cares. And then the Microsoft layoffs have been confirmed to affect Bethesda and Xbox. 343 and Bethesda employees signal that they've been laid off as part of the 10,000 person cuts. A significant amount of the layoffs that could affect the game companies, though, could also be just the QA employees. Like, it could literally just be in this wave of firing a bunch of people that they would also lay off a lot of the QA employees before they manage to form a to form a union in Microsoft, which Microsoft absolutely does not want any unions in them. Which that is a movement that is growing, certainly. Yeah, and these embedded tweets are awful looking now. They must be working with some very old technology that still works to get these embedded tweets to work at all. On Wednesday, Microsoft claimed the cuts were being made in response to macroeconomic conditions and changing customer priorities. What you wouldn't take from this, though, is that they were like getting out of the games business. That would be insane. 5% layoffs is too small. If they were doing that, they would just shut the whole company down and get rid of 10-20% of employees if they were getting out of the games business. Let's see. Now we have our Gamatsu articles. Front Mission First Remake Physical Edition launches this spring in Europe and summer in North America. This is frankly the first bit of video game news so far today that feels like just regular old video game news compared to all the Video Games Chronicles articles that are more drama or more drama around video games than the actual video games. And that's not something I want to see. I don't want every January, February to be just a season of drama in which Video Games Chronicles and other news sites are just trying to stir up as many drama articles because there aren't any announcements for new games or any video games to actually talk about. Let's see. Next, Tsukihime, A Piece of Blue Glass Moon shipments and digital sales top 300,000. So, a tenth of the viewership of The Last of Us for a Japanese visual novel. Bright Memory Infinite Chinese New Year update is now available. It adds a third-person perspective assist mode, plus a toon rendering option for PC users. That's interesting as to what the toon rendering option would be. Here you have two bunny girl outfits around this. This is I think a Chinese game, but it might be a Japanese game. I did see something, and this would be crazy, though, where some country started to claim that putting like bunny girl ears on anime porn would be considered bestiality. In Japan, it's called like kikomoni or something like that. I'm probably mispronouncing or saying the totally wrong thing. But yeah, there's a level of furry characters, and we've seen video games of furries all the time, that even at that point it wouldn't fall against any kind of like bestiality laws, because they're anthropomorphic. They're humanoid shaped creatures. They're not actual animals. And frankly, they're cartoons anyway, so it's animated. What's the big deal? But there may be an increased push that way, in which all of a sudden we start to see furry games being banned from Steam, or just banned in general in countries, because furries somehow is being sold as bestiality. And that's what the anti-porn crowd always does, is that they try to redefine terms and use that as an excuse to censor everything. What I take from this, ignoring the bunny girl cosplay here, which is what this would be, just costumes, is this Bright Memory Infinite seems to be showing a lot of new areas and a lot more content than what I've seen before. Not sure what the toon rendering mode, though, is all about. I would have liked to see that, to see if that just drastically shifts the color palettes and makes it colorful like a Borderlands game or what. Disguise 7 has yet another trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. A strategy RPG called The Dragoness Command of the Flame is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, and Switch. Which, alright, let's see. Turn-based RPG. Wolong Fallen Dynasty story trailer and screenshots is available on Gamatsu if you want to check that out. I've been saying Wulong, but I guess I should be saying Wolong. Remnant from the Ashes is coming to the Switch. Okay. Which, this may just be one more of those games that looks like it probably would struggle on the Switch, but may not really struggle that much because it may be more limited in scope. A narrative puzzle game, The Star Named Eos, from Behind the Frame, the Finest Scenery Studio, launches 2023 for consoles and PC. That is definitely a mouthful. Looks like it is in part photography based, but mostly puzzle based. I don't have time to watch all these trailers. Sword of the Vagrant coming to PS4 and Switch on June 2nd. I would not recommend this game at all. This game definitely kind of baits and switch you by having the character in a bikini armor and then having the game really have nothing to do with the bikini armor at all. It doesn't feel like it makes any sense that she would be in a two-piece bikini. And the game is incredibly difficult. It's just a button mashing hack and slash game. And here you can get a shot of like the bikini armor, and it just doesn't play any role at all. If anything, you never have time to look at it because you're constantly just trying to fight. There's a lot of subsystems and RPG systems that really just don't make any sense until you've beaten the game and played the game several times. The art style is kind of all over the place too. The main original selling point, I think, for Sword of the Vagrant is that they had hand-painted cutscenes or hand-painted backgrounds, but a lot of the hand-painted cutscenes and backgrounds are not even good looking. So, yeah. I don't recommend that game, having recently played it. Forspoken PC features trailer is available if you wanted to check that out. Little Witch Nobita launches March 7th in the West. I believe this is the chibi anime girl in a Dark Souls game. Looks like there's quite a lot of a limited edition collection here for a game that has not really proven itself. In a lot of ways, this is a big problem with limited edition games in general, is that they're trying to hype themselves up for this physical merchandise limited edition stuff before they've even proven themselves as a game. Yeah, this came out in like early access on Steam in 2022, September of 2022. You can kind of see it's at 81% overall with some kind of review bombing aspect, and at 69% in the last 30 days. It is on my wish list, but it definitely seems like there is a whole spot here. Let's see. Development is slow. Disappointed with an improper collaboration. Yeah, there was some kind of weird collaboration. Maybe racist comments. I don't know. If we look more recently, let's see what the more recent reviews are. Really wanted to like this game. Characters are cute. The maps don't look bad either, but it's not fun to play. I have even switched from advanced to standard difficulty. While that made it less punishing, it didn't make it any more fun. Save yourselves a heartbreak and content yourself to gaze longingly on what could have been. So, yeah. This is a game that sold itself perhaps too much on the visuals and never really had a high chance of being great on the gameplay mechanics. Had this been just a Dark Souls clone that didn't have an anime witch chibi girl, moe girl, nobody would have given it a second look. So yeah, now they're trying to sell on, frankly, mediocre success with a limited edition, and they probably will make some money there. If anything, one thing I'd like to see the pandemic killing is this idea of just all this limited edition garbage. Like, all of this ends up in the landfill eventually. Maybe it takes a generation to end up there, but it doesn't. We need to start thinking about multi-generational products. If I have a video game that can be put into some kind of console or computer to emulate, that can go to another generation. But if I handed a video game disc to a kid, they probably aren't going to keep a exclusive trading card in the art book and Steel game if it's just a generic game they don't really care that much about. And these things are not so much collectible in the sense that you could ever sell them as a collector's edition, as much as they are collectible in the sense that you have to put it on your shelf and keep it for the rest of your life to justify how much you paid for it. And definitely these are all things you might want, but a lot of people don't even want, versus things that you would need to just enjoy the game. And I'd like to see less extra nonsense. It's the McDonald's toys equivalent of production. I'd like to see less garbage McDonald's toy like things. And even McDonald's has stopped making garbage McDonald's toy like things, through being forced by, I think, a California law in which I think if you want the McDonald's toy, you have to buy it separately, or you have to ask for it, or something like that. It's not included. Moving on, Anno 1800 Console Edition launches March 16th. I really need to hurry here. Coffee Talk Episode 2 launches April 20th. Coffee Talk and Coffee Talk Episode 2 physical editions have been announced for the PS4 and PS5 and Switch. Veneris Tactics is coming to the Xbox Series, Xbox One, and Switch. This doesn't look like much of a game from that screenshot. Genshin Impact version 3.4 update is now available. Atelier Ryza 3 Alchemist of the End and the Secret Key has been delayed to March 23rd in Japan and March 24th worldwide. You know what? We've been kind of lucky so far in the past months of not seeing a lot of delays from Japanese games, but also we really haven't seen a lot of announcements for Japanese games, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more delays get announced. Dokapon Kingdom Connect has been announced for the Switch. Apparently this is some kind of party game. I'll need to see more details to have any chance of figuring out what it is. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion shipments and digital sales have topped 5 million, which What's funny about Video Games Chronicles article around this versus this is that Komatsu bothered to actually show the thank you art that they put out to say thank you for 5 million being sold, or shipped. I guess they're saying sold, which there's sold versus shipped is slightly different. You get a thank you kind of art piece from Japanese companies when they hit milestones fairly consistently, and for some reason it never gets used in articles. Famitsu has its review scores for issue 1781, giving Disguise 7 32 out of 40 and Fire Emblem Engage 36 out of 40. Straight 9s across the board of the 4 reviewers, so they really liked Fire Emblem Engage. Disguise 7 has yet another trailer. Wow, it's just a ton of them. Now, if Disguise 7 just came out in Japan and they have a review for it, that would make an argument that we should stop seeing so many trailers from Disguise 7, but I wouldn't be surprised if we go another week or two and we're still getting a lot of trailers from Disguise 7. Dragon Quest Champions has been announced for iOS and Android, which, okay. They did say a couple years back that there was like 11 Dragon Quest games in development. There is a definite inconsistency in the art styles of Dragon Quest games when you look at this compared to other Dragon Quest games. This is much more flatter of an animation style, where most of the animations I've been seeing lately have been more 3D. This may be more in line with what the original Dragon Quest games looked like. A game called Elderand launches February 16th for PC and Switch. Let's see what it is. Side-scrolling action-adventure game. Let's look at the Steam page so we can look at the screenshots a little bit faster than watching a trailer. Yeah, it looks like it's a hack and slash kind of Castlevania game. Looks like it's dark and gory. I could see something there around that. Raiden 3 Ex Mikado Mania X is coming to the West for basically everything, according to Gamatsu. Hogwarts Legacy has a cinematic trailer if you want to check that out. Tachia details of soul jumping, ukulele exploration, and more. I don't know what this game is, Tachia, though. Seems like it's 3D CG in that case, but then also seems like it might zoom out when you're actually playing, and this might just be a cutscene. And this kind of animation in this cutscene and this flatter, almost point-and-click pixely animation in the actual gameplay is oddly inconsistent. We perhaps are hitting a point where we're going to hit a saturation level of kids running around in a island paradise, having a fun summer, playing ukuleles and just exploring. It seems like what they're trying to do is make survival games, but get away from making survival games where you're an adult just trying to survive against zombies or just surviving in an apocalyptic environment or a kind of boring environment, stuck on the ocean like Raft or just in a forest. Yeah, there is arguably going to be 3 or 4 of these types of games coming out very soon or very close to each other. Park Beyond Management trailer is available if you want to check that out. Park Beyond is, I guess, a amusement park management game. Returnal for PC launches February 15th. Power Wash Simulator for PS5, PS4, and Switch launches January 31st alongside a free DLC Tomb Raider special pack. It's currently available for Xbox One, Xbox Series, and PC. I guess Power Wash Simulator is going to have you power washing the mansion of Lara Croft, if that's the idea. Which that would be an interesting collaboration to hint at a return to the Croft Manor in the next Tomb Raider game, which almost certainly will be the case. I'm not sure if any of the 3 reboot Lara Croft games ever even showed the Croft Manor. Jet the Far Shore free expansion Given Time launches January 31st alongside the Steam release. Okay, that's our last Gematsu article, so now let's try and burn through all the new games that have come out. I'll give this a short. Farlanders, a city builder with some brownness to it. I'll give this a short, but I don't think I really would want to play this myself. Yeah, lowered standards, definitely. We can say no to Dungeon Rite. I think we can say no to Umbrella Escape. Well, you know what? I'll give it a short. Just basically anything. I think I can say no to this game. So if I do get the blur going, because we will run into an adult game, I won't get it going today, or probably anytime before Monday, if I even get it that early. What would happen is you would still see what you're seeing now, which arguably I might even get rid of, like the Yu-Gi-Oh! In the top right in the stock ticker, and when I would blur, it would just blur everything on the screen. Can't really do much more than that. I guess I could try to just blur here in this part and then not blur the text, but it would be so incredibly risky, and it would blur the screen on this side always. So, which wouldn't be terrible. I could try that, but I don't. That might be actually more difficult to do. Probably would be more difficult. Do I want a robot fighting game? I don't think so. I really am getting down to the point where almost anything, I probably should have given that game more deference instead of just dismissing it as a horror game, since it was positively reviewed. The other problem certainly is my cushion has gone flat in my chair and I'm uncomfortable, and that is making me not want to actually make decisions either. Let's see. I'm a little surprised I haven't seen an adult game so far today. It's Wednesday, so this is the one day where you have a small chance that no adult games would be released, because there is some level of bundling Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday in which they don't seem to release adult games, but particularly if it's on the adult storefront between Wednesday and Saturday, everything does seem to be allowed, although it does still seem very much like it gets bundled into groups of games. When I see an adult game, it's 3 or 4 adult games in a row, which that wouldn't make sense. So here's our first adult game, Clarisse the Princess Knight Extra Story. It is an RPG Maker game with a character who is naked in some of the screenshots, but that's pretty much it. So here's a great example of one of those games where you have just like giant boobs and armor over it, and then sometimes the character is naked. But even in this case, I would have thought that there would have been a less censored version of this armor that would have shown more cleavage, or she would have just been topless the whole time. but the actual game here is just an RPG Maker garbage game. It is selling for $2.39. It's English, Japanese, and Chinese, simplified and traditional Chinese. They're even selling it as a short RPG experience, although arguably it's probably not short enough for the fact that the only reason you'd probably buy that is if you wanted to see the nudity in it. You definitely, I don't think, would want to buy it for the actual experience. This looks like this might be a Korean game called The Bad Kids. I'll give that a follow. It looks interesting. Nope, it's a Chinese game. Well, there is always the hope for good Chinese games, even though I'm not looking at Chinese only games. I'm only looking at Chinese games that also support English, which is fair enough because I would never play a Chinese only language game. There's a slightly higher percentage of Asians who I think kind of hate kids and will say kids are bad. I don't think that there is actually a higher instance of delinquency in Asian countries compared to, say, the West, United States. If anything, I think delinquency and just bad kids in general are probably higher in the United States because I think there's like less pressure on parents to be good parents in the United States, where at the very least in Asia, in most Asian countries, if you have bad kids, you have bad parents. And every country is going to have bad parents, and inherently it makes just an argument that parents shouldn't be allowed to raise their own kids, and that they should all just be sent off to boarding schools, public boarding schools. And then there would just be bad teachers that you could deal with on a much smaller scale. But yeah, I'm not sure I really would want to play this. It seems like it's based on some TV series called Cat's Cradle, which that's intriguing. That a Chinese TV series might spin off into a video game. Secret Pyramid VR. Well, if this just had a little bit more polish to it, I would say yes to this. Even though it is a Chinese game. But nope, I'm not even going to give that a short. Trying to burn through all this. Here we have a Mario Brothers clone, just a one-for-one Mario Brothers clone, which honestly, I'm surprised you don't see more of this. Like, why does that need to be early access? I don't know. Like, it would make a lot of sense to just make new levels based on Super Mario Bros. 1, make new enemies, make a new hero. Like, Nintendo can't own a question mark block. Maybe they could try to copyright that. It does seem like this game might have multiple currencies, but it doesn't have in-app purchases. But yeah, obviously you could make new levels without even adding new gameplay mechanics around Super Mario Bros. 1 and sell a game. And probably nobody would buy it because it doesn't have Mario in the name, but it would be something to try. I guess I'm going to make a YouTube short on shoot 'em up games too. I've probably been a little cruel around just ignoring shoot 'em up games. Penguin Adventure. Again, just a platformer. Not something that I really would put on the follow list, but you could see people saying yes to it. This JSC, is this the same publisher? No. You have MYH. You have WXM. It feels like these may be the same publisher, just putting in fake information. Like, Yeah. Hmm. But I can't prove that, can I? He feels very much like somebody has just lied and put in fake information as a developer name and publisher, and then put a bunch of kind of mobile-like games. But yes, this coin image here and this image here has been reused. So I'm going to say no to all of these on second thought, because of apparent dishonesty out of maybe a paranoid effect. It seems to me like there's somebody that's lied and put simplistic games on by different names, whereas if they had just kept the same name, I would have kept them in consideration. But that dishonesty probably synergizes with the games being extremely short and extremely bad. But that does still get back to the same idea, to that there's a empty space, certainly, where you could make a Super Mario Bros. Clone and just sell it, just add new levels. There's eight levels with 3 levels in Super Mario Bros., so we're talking like 24 levels. Next game is an adult game called All Memories Hentai, which is just a card matching game with each card being mostly just a center torso. So you're seeing cleavage in bikinis, or you're seeing the hips in bikinis. Maybe there is some nudity here too, but the heads are cut off in each of these square cards that you're trying to match. It's $4.49, English only, and yeah, it's just a memory game and not very polished. Way too expensive also. Let's see. Next we have something called Definitely Not Fried Chicken, which is a drug dealing game with the fried chicken being a front, I guess. Yeah. There was that like Dope Wars game that was somewhat popular, so I'll give that a chance. It probably doesn't really deserve it, but I'll be generous. I'm still totally willing to dismiss dark screenshot horror asset flip games like this. Monster Girl 2. Is this an adult game? Seems like there might be an uncensored patch when they talk about the full edition. Is this just a visual novel? Let's see. Seems like it's a hidden object game. Spot the difference game with Monster Girls, and the question if the full edition has nudity or if it's just more content. And then there's bonus. It starts free to play, but then the bonus is $5.59, which that may not be that much anyways. It does say it has sexual content and adult content in general. Spot the difference games are probably a good type of adult game to make, like, because then you are just 100% focusing on showing the art the whole time. The only thing there would be spotting the difference, which in this case the difference seems to be highlighted only in this little mirror image, and then the rest of the screen is taken up with the original version of the image. not terrible, although also seemingly not being reviewed very well. Should I give this a follow? I don't think it needs a follow though. Gray's Counter GM is a shoot 'em up game, which I'll make a YouTube short around. At a certain level, I guess I'm also dismissing some games because I'm saying to myself, well, I'm making a YouTube short around them, I'm showing them off that way, while not actually reviewing or endorsing them, because they're the types of games that I really would never play anyways. But I could certainly give myself that break of saying, yes, there are a lot of games that I'll make YouTube shorts around, but not actually play. Because there is definitely a lot of games I won't actually play. And I'm not getting better at making content and playing games by any means. I'm just getting slower and slower at it. Huntscape is an interesting idea. It's a multiplayer PvP game though. Being chased by animals in the woods. Being hunted by animals. Which, yep, that makes some sense. Lake Haven Chrysalis. This is a little polygon, but it might have something interesting about it. I'm just trying to burn through Osiris New Dawn mixed. Decent amount of people have played this, but it's mixed reviewed as an online PvP game. So I'd have to assume that it's just not well received, and because of that, I don't think I'll bother to give it a spotlight. Like, if I'm getting the message directly from reviews that the game is mixed or not good, then why would I highlight it? Alright, and then we have our GameDeveloper.com articles, if that's going to work. Modern Warfare 2 and God of War Ragnarok were 2022's most downloaded PlayStation games. It's time to pour one out for the Stadia. The Google Stadia has been shut down as of today. There is a more complicated than it should be process in which you can turn your Google Stadia controller into a Bluetooth mode controller. It doesn't seem like it's supported right now on iOS, but it does seem like it works on Android and would probably work on Windows too. Yeah, it would almost certainly work on Windows too. It is a complicated process that you can go to, I think it's stadia.com/controllers, and you have some time to reprogram your Stadia controller to that to be in Bluetooth mode versus the wireless mode. The wireless aspect on the controller, though, I think is going to be just not used at all at that point. And this is Google making your controller still usable in something after already refunding the price of the controller and everything else in the games you've bought from Stadia. This is not somebody hacking it to do something better. And in a lot of ways, I couldn't imagine you could get too much of a value out of hacking a controller to have a Wi-Fi connection in most situations. It would be a unique, weird use. And I definitely wouldn't recommend buying Stadia controllers right now unless they're just incredibly cheap. And I don't think they're going to be that cheap. Monster Hunter Rise, we already said, topped 5 million sales. Microsoft laying off 10,000 employees plus. Let's see if they have any details here that I can skim from this. No real details. It'd be interesting, certainly, to get full lists of people that were laid off. Um, Inherently, particularly in video games, we have this problem of people, like 22 people on the Callisto Protocol, not being credited for working on that game, and then people being laid off and fired, and there just not being a good work history database for artists in particular who you might have some interest of them getting credit. Everybody deserves to be credited for working on at a company, but it is crazy, certainly, to that there isn't more of a database out there. You would imagine that in the United States, the IRS has full-on lists of where everybody's worked and everybody at every job, but probably would be nice if you could access that list and people could get better credit, or you could pull from that list and build a resume from that instantaneously. That's one thing certainly that people, when they're building resumes, struggle with, is what was the job description that you want to use versus what was the job description that the job would use or confirm, because you can certainly accidentally over embellish on a resume by saying you did one thing and then your boss saying you did something completely different or had a completely different job title. When you're not even intending to be dishonest. But yeah, everybody should get credit. This is my main thought here. Let's see, Elden Ring and Phil Spencer win the 2023 New York Game Awards. So here's all the awards being won here. Off-Broadway Award for Best Indie Game. Interesting that they would use the Off-Broadway descriptor for video games. Off-Broadway does not mean that it literally is off the street of Broadway in New York. It means that it is under, I think, 1,000 seats in the audience. It's just a smaller theater, where on Broadway would be over 1,000. But then I guess the Herman Melville Award for Best Writing in Games also doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, these New York awards are trying to tie in video games to a history of Broadway and New York arts in a way that it's never been tied in before. They're trying to embrace video games as the New York art scene is probably falling apart and dying. Let's see. European Parliament has voted to regulate in-game loot boxes. They plan on regulating loot boxes in video games and ensuring that the controversial mechanic doesn't take advantage of young players. I imagine that's probably a first step. And it'll be a while before they implement any actual rules or actions. Let's see, Ubisoft devs call out company mismanagement after the CEO comments. We pretty much already talked about that. Let's see, Detroit Become Human has also sold 8 million copies, which, if anything, I think the fact that they're even talking about Detroit Become Human at this point is a mistake, because this game is several years old and those numbers are kind of small for as old as this game is. But it is one of the few Quantic Dream games they can point to. But also, I think Quantic Dreams has already been acquired. They were acquired by NetEase. I thought they were acquired by Embracer Group. Here we can see yet another embedded Twitter tweet. Oh, man, that looks awful. Yep. So it does definitely feel like at this point that the Twitter third-party app being shut down or reduced in some way is a bad decision. Like I cannot put any positive spin on that one. Blue Reflection Second Light Year is very positive, so as far as fall list cleanup, I will put this on the wish list. As a girl female protagonist JRPG game series. One of the things too is, I think as far as the Blue Reflection series, there is just Blue Reflection and Blue Reflection Second Light so far. So if you were going to compare this to like the Persona series, which is probably a decent comparison, you are going to have a lot less time you would have to commit to it. Plus it's a newer series, so you don't have to play older games. Let's see, Blue Oak Bridge came out in November and needs more time. Doesn't look terrible. I could just skip ahead and put this on the wish list, and I think I will. It is a farming sim game, and those aren't my favorite types of games, but whatever. Bloody Paws Unleashed would need more time if it's going to succeed, which it might. Bloodshore is a full motion video game, and it's mostly positive, so I can put that on the wish list. Oddly labeled as a battle royale game too. A full motion battle royale game. I doubt it really is battle royale. It's probably a narrative FMV game around the theme of a battle royale. Blood Rain Betrayal Fresh Bites is mostly positive, so I can put that on the wish list. I think this is a remake or remaster of Blood Rain Betrayal. Blood West is very positive. Monsters in the West. This one's early access, so I'll leave it on the fall list. So, Blood Scheme needs more time. Blood Nova. We're going through the bees, and there's a lot of games with blood in it. Is a point and click, and it's positive and over 30 reviews, so relevant enough, particularly for a point and click. Blood Hospital probably won't get any more reviews. Let me see what the reviews are here. None of which are in English. This is probably just a Chinese horror game. I'll give it more time. Blood Bay needs more time. Some of these need to actually be removed. Blood and Zombies. Is this a VR game? No. It is mostly positive at 72%. It's really on the edge there. That doesn't look terrible. And it does just definitely feel like it's probably just a zombie shooter game, but not that bad. I guess the real question would come down to, would I ever really have time to just play a generic zombie shooter game? I don't know. Seems like there might be some tower defense element to it also in 3D. But yeah, there almost certainly would be better things to play than in a incredibly generic zombie shooter game. And see, in the 2 hours and 40 minutes I've streamed, it says I only have 26 new tweets on Twitter, which that seems like not that many. So we'll do this spectate live, and I'll scroll down my Twitter feed and see if there's anything new worth mentioning. Considerably small number of adult games today, but we did see some, so I'm not concerned about there being no adult games. You can get Genital Jousting on Steam for 69 cents to celebrate its 5-year anniversary. Which, that's a silly game, certainly. Apparently, Halo veteran Joseph Staten, who was brought in to help ship Halo Infinite, is said to be rejoining Xbox Publishing, but not getting laid off. I could see definitely a lot of the Halo Infinite people getting laid off and then just abandoning Halo. Let's see. I don't suspect there will be any other news. So this is where you get into a weird position where there isn't even that much going on, either because Twitter is dying or just because we're in a drought of video game news, and then the Duel Live is taking longer than what I have to talk about. Alright, well, that is that. Probably should play some more off screen too. And I should just start wrapping up now. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching.